tireless search for survivors enters day 5 in New York City. Families and rescue workers refuse to give up hope that more people will be rescued from the fallen Twin Towers. However, for the past 3 days, the rubble has yielded only bodies.
Another city, another recovery effort, surveying the damage at the Pentagon. 187 people lost their lives here.
While New York City buries 3 of its top firefighters, more than 300 others are still missing.
Hello and welcome. I'm Jim Clancy.
And I'm Relitza Vasileva at the CNN Center. You're watching CNN's continuing coverage of America's new war.
Well, let's begin in New York City, where smoke continues to billow out from the ruins of what was once one of the world's most recognizable landmarks. No one has been pulled alive from the site of the collapse of the World Trade Center since Wednesday. But continued rescue operations are giving hopes to thousands of families and friends waiting to hear from their missing loved ones. Officials say they will reevaluate each day and decide when the rescue becomes a recovery effort. Investigators also report finding what they say is a passport that apparently belonged to one of the hijackers. It was found several blocks from the crash site itself. 187 people are now presumed dead from the Pentagon crash. The investigation into Tuesday's attacks said to be the largest in U.S. history. Some 4,000 Federal Bureau of Investigation agents and more than 3,000 support personnel taking part in the ongoing investigations.
CNN has learned that Pakistan is sending a delegation to Afghanistan to demand that the ruling Taliban hand over Osama bin Laden. The United States says it considers bin Laden to be the prime suspect behind Tuesday's terror attacks. We're now joined by Tom Mintier in the Pakistani capital, Islamabad. Tom.
Relitza, also an update. Osama bin Laden reportedly denying he had any involvement in the acts in the United States. The Afghan Islamic press, on a piece of letterhead received in Peshawar out of Afghanistan, a statement from a close aide of Osama bin Laden, Abdul Samad, quoting bin Laden that he had nothing to do with what happened in the United States. As you said at the beginning, the Pakistan government is asking the Taliban to hand over Osama bin Laden in the next 3 days or face a huge military operation. A representative from the Pakistani government will go into Afghanistan and meet with Mullah Omar, the head of the Taliban organization, probably tomorrow. Now, we also have some details from our sources here in Pakistan about the phone conversation last night between President George W. Bush and the Pakistani president. Part of that phone conversation was possibly part of the deal to bring Pakistan involvement on the side of the United States. The demands by Pakistan for their assistance, that the U.S. help in economic ways for Pakistan, possibly lifting the economic sanctions that currently exist, and help with the $30 billion debt problem that they currently have. So that is part of it. Another part of what we're hearing here in Islamabad is that the United States, part of the agreement that no Pakistan ground troops involved in the operation, their soil not used, only the airspace would be used. Pakistan is also asking the United States to intercede in the dispute with India over Kashmir. They've also asked the U.S. government, as our sources tell us here, that India and Israel not be involved in the operation against Afghanistan if one is launched, not allow the land of Pakistan to be used. According to our sources close to President Musharraf, Osama bin Laden holds the key to war or no war in this region. Now, the meetings occurring here in Islamabad to shore up support behind the government's decision will probably be going on late into the night here on Sunday in Pakistan, in Islamabad, as President Musharraf attempts to build a coalition of support for his decision to assist the United States in its operation against Osama bin Laden. Meetings have been going on all day, started early this morning, meeting with editorial writers, media people, religious leaders, politicians. It's a long list of meetings that's going to go on late into the night here. But the biggest news that we have out of the meetings is that an ultimatum is going to be sent by a Pakistani senior official into Afghanistan to the Taliban that they hand over Osama bin Laden within the next 3 days or face military action. Ralitza?
Tom, back on the first piece of breaking news you brought to us, this statement by Osama bin Laden to the Islamic press saying that he had nothing to do with the terrorist attacks in the United States. How much credence can we give this quote?
Well, you have to take it a bit on faith. Now, the names are all right. Abdul Samad is a close aide of Osama bin Laden, and it did come on the Afghan Islamic Press letterhead. This fax that was sent in denying responsibility was sent to Peshawar, and we have to go basically on that. But again, this is an organization that supposedly, according to the Taliban, has had their fax machines taken away, their cell phones taken away, their satellite phones taken away, no internet access, no fax machines. So how this note was faxed out of Afghanistan here to Pakistan remains a mystery. But it was a note on the Afghan Islamic Press letterhead, and it did quote a close aide to Osama bin Laden. But it's extremely difficult to verify the authenticity of this note if it indeed was sent by the people it was purportedly sent from. Ralitza?
Tom, thank you. Jim?
Well, obviously, Release, with all those developments Tom's telling us about, we're looking at a situation where the pressure is being ratcheted up on Osama bin Laden on one hand, on the Taliban rulers of Afghanistan on the other. What's the effect of all that? Let's find out. Nick Robertson is in Kabul. He joins us now by video phone. Nick.
The streets in Kabul and in other cities around the country still seem fairly busy. The market's quite bustling. There are some stalls that are closed down, but generally it appears as business as normal. The car mechanics are out on the streets. The tin makers are still hard at work. The furniture and cabinet makers working as well. It does seem like life is normal. However, it's not. Food prices are going up 10 to 15%. Many Afghans also becoming concerned not only about the possibility of missile strikes from America, but also the fact that the borders with Pakistan and Iran may be closing in the near future. Both countries looking at that option in the near future. For many Afghans, however, they're really too poor to get out of the cities. Their main aim most days is just to put food on their table, and that job is going to likely be made harder in the coming days and weeks. A new ruling from the Taliban leadership has ruled that all foreigners must leave Afghanistan. The last of the aid workers began leaving a little time ago. There was only a handful here, but their concerns are that in Afghanistan there are several millions of people that depend on handouts from international aid groups of various sorts, food, shelter, bread, things like this. Beyond that also, there are several hundreds of thousands of internally displaced Afghans living in makeshift camps. They've been displaced from their homes because of an ongoing 4-year drought. They are, aid groups say, solely dependent on international aid. And without the charity groups' support to help them, help feed them, they're very concerned about what could happen to those people. Also, journalists have been requested to leave. It's unclear yet if that will actually have to happen. But certainly the Taliban Foreign Ministry saying that they cannot guarantee the safety of foreigners remaining here if there is a missile attack from America. And in the past, there have been instances in 1998 when there was a missile attack in Afghanistan following the bombings of the U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania. There were attacks on United Nations compounds, and indeed one Italian worker here at that time was killed. Certainly for now, though, the sense of isolation here is growing.
Nick, thank you very much. Meanwhile, Washington is still considering how to retaliate. As Kelly Wallace reports, President Bush is warning the American public that the road ahead will be long and difficult.
Spending the weekend at the secluded presidential retreat in the Maryland mountains, President Bush huddles with his national security team and prepares the American people for war.
We're at war. There's been an act of war declared upon America by terrorists, and we will respond accordingly.
The president refuses to discuss military options, but for the first time, he specifically named suspected terrorist Osama bin Laden as a, quote, prime suspect behind Tuesday's terrorism spree. Bin Laden is believed to be hiding out in Afghanistan, with the ruling Taliban government providing him safe haven.
This act will not stand. We will find those who did it. We will smoke them out of their holes. We will get them running, and we'll bring them to justice.
When asked if those words mean President Bush is considering using ground troops to attack terrorists, aides say nothing has been ruled out. But winning this so-called war and finding the elusive bin Laden won't be easy, says a former Clinton administration official.
We're not fighting a military, we're not fighting an organized power, but we're fighting a very diffuse and shadowy organization that has links in many different parts of the world.
Knowing Americans are hungry for swift retaliation, the president uses his radio address to say a sweeping response will come in time.
You will be asked for your patience, for the conflict will not be short. You will be asked for resolve, for the conflict will not be easy. You will be asked for your strength, because the course to victory may be long.
And aides say President Bush has gained strength from his meeting Friday with more than 200 family members with loved ones still missing, believing his job is to turn their sorrow into something positive for future generations. While the American people overwhelmingly support a military response, keeping that support up will be another big challenge for the president, especially if a prolonged military attack means some U.S. troops lose their lives. Kelly Wallace, CNN, near Camp David, Maryland.
Officials say it could take 10 days or more to recover all the victims killed in the Pentagon crash. The U.S. Defense Department says the remains of 85 people have been removed from the wreckage so far. The total number of presumed dead at the Pentagon crash site stands at 187. We're learning more about two of the hijackers who rammed the American Airlines jet into the complex. Authorities say they previously had been under government watch as suspected associates of Osama bin Laden. Much attention has been paid to the U.S. victims killed in the attacks, but the death toll extends far beyond America. Germany reports at least 554 missing or dead. Among the other countries reporting scores of casualties are Switzerland, India, Canada, the United Kingdom, and Russia.
The investigation revealing information about two of the 5 hijackers who crashed American Airlines Flight 77 into the Pentagon. Eileen O'Connor has more on that investigation and a possible tie to another recent attack on U.S. interests.
They booked the tickets on American Airlines Flight 77 from Washington to Los Angeles on Travelocity, using a New Jersey address, mailboxes, etc. And names U.S. officials confirm were known to them: Khalid al-Mihdhar and Salim al-Hamzi. Once on board, together with al-Hamzi's brother and an old roommate, a known pilot, they took over the flight, crashing it into the Pentagon. Within minutes, the facade of a symbol of American strength crumbled. As the search and rescue efforts continue, sources say the FBI was informed that Khalid al-Mihdhar and Salim al-Hamzi were associated with Osama bin Laden and the bombing of the USS Cole. One source confirms they had concrete evidence al-Mihdhar had met with a man who was later involved in the attack on the Cole.
One was kind of short and the other two was tall.
Al-Mihdhar was a frequent visitor of al-Hamzi and his brother Nawak in the San Diego apartment complex.
They was always together. If they left, they was together. They come back, they together.
They hung out a lot at the pool, despite telling their neighbors they were studying at a nearby college.
You'll see 3 of them in the pool swimming, or you'll see the dude always looking out the window, another one outside the door on the phone.
At one point, they left, telling one landlord they were in Arizona, living in different cities at different addresses. As it turns out, rooming with another hijacker aboard that plane, Hani Hanjour. Hani attended this flying school, CRM, Cockpit Resource Management, but left without a certification.
He's kind of a waste of time. He wouldn't show up for flights on time, didn't do his homework.
Not a promising student, but skilled enough to carry out the mission. Eileen O'Connor, CNN, Washington.
The United States military moving quickly to shore up domestic defenses in the U.S. About 35,000 reservists are expected to be called up for active duty as part of Operation Noble Eagle. The latest on that, let's go to Bob Franken. He's at the Pentagon. Bob.
And Jim, those reservists are still being determined, precisely which ones. The units have not been fully informed yet. Individuals are not being fully informed. This is a process that could take, we've been told, several days, even weeks. We do know that they're going to be used for what is called homeland defense. That is to say, they're going to be used domestically, mainly support roles as the United States military gears up. Of course, a gearing up that is centered in this building, damaged though it is. And we're now almost 5 days after the plane hit the side of the Pentagon, caving it in, and there's still the search for casualties that is going on there. You can see a live picture. The fire is long out, of course, but there is still the intense digging through the rubble and the shoring up of everything inside as the search for the victims goes on. And there have been 85 remains that have been taken out thus far, and the Pentagon ultimately says that there will be about 188 casualties. And that's a figure that moves around quite a bit, but by the time it is through, there will be 188 or so who were killed in the crash of that American Airlines plane into the spot you're seeing right now in the Pentagon, a spot that is going to take at least 2 years and well over $100 million to repair. Now, as for the people who in fact were killed, their friends and relatives, those who were missing, were allowed to come by yesterday and set up a memorial of flowers and balloons and spend some time with reflection. They were brought in by buses, obviously under heavy security, to have their moments of privacy. They've been at a nearby hotel for the most part getting counseling. They were accompanied by a heavy contingent of military supporters trying to make this as painless as possible. But of course, the pain here is as real as the pain anywhere in a building which has been badly damaged, but there seems to be a huge resolve now to recover in the building, recover and make plans for retaliation. Jim?
I just want to get a sense from you, if I can, Bob, about those plans for retaliation. And is there a sense of personal indignation, perhaps, on part of the military planners there at what's happened?
There is, as a matter of fact, exactly that, a sense of indignation. The military people here, of course, are people who want to use their wares. They want to use them effectively. There are many questions that come up about exactly what type of response one might see. Will it be a massive response, which, of course, the United States military would have the ability to do with its 2.5 million forces, about half of those reserves, by the way, or is it going to be something more surgical, some sort of missile strike, some sort of very, very precise airplane strike, or some sort of commando action by special forces or SEALs units or something like that. All of that's still being drawn up, options being drawn up. They will be discussed at the highest levels, of course, and we're told that a plan will be carried out.
All right, Bob Franken reporting to us there live from the Pentagon. Ralitza?
Jim, so many were lost last week. So many have yet to be found. New York said goodbye Saturday to 3 men with long ties to the fire department. Chief Peter Gansey, First Deputy Fire Commissioner William Feehan, and Chaplain Michael Judge. More than 300 New York firefighters were killed or remain missing in the Twin Towers collapse.
Today was a very solemn and difficult day in New York City with the 3 funerals that we had for Bill Feehan, for Pete Gansey, and for Father Judge. And unfortunately, it probably is an indication of what we're going to have to face in the future.
Sadness, goodbyes too in suburban Washington, where mourners remembered lawyer and conservative commentator Barbara Olson. Olson was on the hijacked jet that slammed into the Pentagon.
Barbara's spirit survives in each of us, just as the spirit of our great country lives on. She lives in our memories, now dampened by tears and made hazy by grief. But she's here, her ever-present high heels clicking across the floors of this cathedral and through all the passageways of our sentiments.
It has been nearly 5 days since the attacks against targets in the U.S. Despite the nonstop efforts by thousands of rescue workers, only 5 people have been pulled alive from the rubble of what was once the World Trade Center. With each passing day, hopes of finding more survivors are fading. Let's go to Gary Tuchman in New York for an update there. Gary, explain to us, if you can, a little bit about what is underground there beneath the World Trade Center that might lend some hope to the people who are still waiting for word of their loved ones.
Well, Jim, there are 6 levels underground. Each level is about 20 feet tall, so you're talking about 120 feet of area underneath the rubble. And that's why people here have thought that there's a possibility they could find lots of survivors. But as you said, so far, only 5 survivors. And another day is now dawning, and if anyone is alive under there, time is running short. It has been 5 days since terrorists commandeered 2 planes and smashed them into the World Trade Center buildings behind me, which were the 2 tallest buildings in New York City. A short time ago, a woman who lived 2 blocks away from the World Trade Center complex gave us some videotape she shot from her balcony just after this disaster happened. She said she was frozen while she was taking the video, but the close-up pictures of the World Trade Center tower is very compelling. You see people waving curtains and shirts and whatever they can to get the attention, and you can only wonder the absolute horrors these people were going through. It's very hard to look at these pictures. Hundreds of emergency workers are on the scene as we speak. They have been there ever since this happened on Tuesday. They are feverishly looking for survivors. None have been found over the last 3 days, 5 the first 2 days. 4,972 people are still missing. Late last night, a sight that was poignant and pitiful at the same time, a fire truck was found in the rubble. That gives you an idea of how deep this rubble is. At some point, it's 100 feet tall. It was actually pulled out by a tow truck. The fire truck was gray, it was crushed. It said on it, Ladder 18. There was no one inside of the fire truck, and one wonders what happened to the men and or women who came on that truck to the World Trade Center that day on Tuesday. This has truly been a week that has changed New York City and the United States forever. Jim, back to you.
Gary, let me talk a little bit more about the underground question there at the World Trade Center, why there might still be some hope. Now, some of those levels were where trains came into the World Trade Center to bring commuters into the lower Manhattan area. Have they been able to work inside any of those tunnels?
That's right. There's an elaborate setup underneath the World Trade Center. Not only was there the New York City subway under there, there was also the PATH train. PATH stands for Port Authority Trans-Hudson. It's the train that takes you from New Jersey into New York City. So you had those 2 train setups. You also had a shopping mall underground, so you had an elaborate area down there. And they have been able to get to some of the areas and they haven't seen anything. Other areas underground are flooded and they haven't been able to get to them. But they're still trying to dig through the top of the rubble to get down to those parts there to see if anyone is alive. But that's one question that everyone's asking. Why don't you just come through the subway stations and see what you can see? They have done that and they haven't seen anyone from that angle yet.
All right, Gary Tuchman there reporting to us live from Lower Manhattan. Relitza.
Jim, for thousands of families and friends searching for their missing loved ones, the Armory in the city has been the source of information as well as comfort. More than 3,000 people have been through the building's doors to register the missing. And let's go now to Michael Okwul, who is standing outside that building. Michael.
Relitza, New Yorkers are waking up to another morning to discover that, in fact, the nightmare is real yet again. And for us in the media, another day to talk to you about numbers and to also talk to you about individual stories that are worth telling. 4,900 people, or more than 4,900 people, buried under the twisted ash and the rubble of the Twin Towers, and tens of thousands of family members and who are connected to some of those people who are missing, hanging on to the slimmest hope and looking for some kind of, some measure of resolution. Many of them come here, many blocks north of Ground Zero, but the emotional Ground Zero, the Armory on Lexington and 26th Street, where they come and they fill out forms, where they talk to some of the workers here, and they provide identifiable traits of some of their loved ones, everything from the color of their eyes to recognizable scars to everything to the sort of nail polish that they like to use. Since Thursday, some 3,100 people have filed through those doors, and yesterday the New York City Health Department announced the fact that a medical lab company called LabCorp was providing free DNA collections, which will enable the rescue workers to use that information and actually identify some of the bodies that are found. They're asked to provide everything from toothbrushes to hairbrushes to samples of saliva from some of the closest blood members of the family, any items that might have been used exclusively by some of those people who are missing. Earlier I spoke to a young woman who is missing her stepsister.
Hope is still there, but it's dwindling fast. I keep hearing reports of bodies found, of, unidentified bodies, and every time I hear that, I say, oh my God, could she be one of those people? And my only thought is right now that I just hope that they find her herself to give us that closure if it gets to that point. I just hope that we can get that closure as a family and move on from there and mourn her together.
Ralitza, this is the last day that this place will be used as a site for this sort of thing. It is moving across town to the west side, but if the spirit of New Yorkers continues to be the same as it has been all week, that area will be strewn in posters and pictures of many of the loved ones and those who are missing. You're going to hear the word closure for the next couple days, but for some of the people who have come to this site over the past couple days, their lives will not return to normalcy. Ralitza.
Certainly, Michael, I cannot imagine how difficult and how much strength it would take from people to come to this armory and to bring a toothbrush, a hairbrush, to bring things that could possibly mean that their loved ones might need to be identified and that they might not be alive.
That is so true. In fact, I spoke to somebody. I asked her that very question. I said that must have been very difficult to actually look at her items and pick them up and have to bring them in. And she said, yeah, it was one of the most difficult things she had to do. And yet, you get the sense, and in fact, she gave me every indication that there's a collective strength that a lot of the family members are deriving from the collective spirit of the New Yorkers, and I dare say the rest of the country. They feel such great support. But even though many of them are actually losing hope that they will actually find life underneath the rubble, they continue to come.
Michael, thank you very much. Jim?
Well, the many human dimensions of Tuesday's terrorist attacks becoming evident as the days go by, as Michael was explaining there. On Saturday, New York said farewell to the chaplain of the city's firefighters. Richard Blystone has this report.
Surgery is going to keep news photographer David Handschuh away from some friends' funerals, but this one he wasn't going to miss. Because in the line of duty, he saw a lot of Father Mike Judge, the firefighter's chaplain, who was killed Tuesday while giving last rites to a fireman.
He would hold your hand and you would just feel good. He emanated some form of just positive goodwill that nobody else I've ever met could. By just touching you, by putting his hand on you and giving you a hug, you just floated away happy.
Many of those in the overflow crowd had narrow escapes that day. David Handschuh had two.
You hear the sound and then the building starts falling down in slow motion. And I'm a photographer. The initial reaction was to raise the camera and take a picture, but something up here said, just run. And in the 20 plus years I've been doing this, I've never once run from anything. But it probably saved my life. The wall of debris that came flying down just picked me up and threw me a block.
One leg shattered, the other torn up. Firemen pulled him to a delicatessen. Another photographer captured that moment, but it wasn't over.
When the second building collapsed, the facade of that building was blown in. We were trapped once again. Using their hands and tools and sheer strength and will, they pushed their way out.
For news photographers, cameramen, reporters, days like that are part of an unwritten contract with life. So too with soldiers, policemen, firemen, which doesn't make it much easier. But the thousands still missing downtown, they didn't sign up for this.
I'm so sorry that so many people lost their lives over this. It's not comprehensible. It's not right.
At the end, the photographer pulled out his camera. It may not make much of a picture, but this one's personal. Richard Blystone, CNN, New York.
And as Richard mentioned, for some, the search for answers is deeply personal. Triggered by the uncertainty of what really happened to a loved one who worked in one of the buildings that were attacked, Candy Crowley has a story of a father trying to locate his missing daughter who worked at the Trade Center building in New York.
Yes, Dan? Yes, this is David Vincent.
He's an Eastman Kodak executive
How are
from
you?
Webster, New York. A man with a problem to solve, a man on a mission.
How is it being set up so that I can make the best use of my time? Because you're working a timeline here. You have to get to your daughter as fast as you can.
Melissa is missing. She's a technology recruiter at Alliance Consulting.
But we know that
floor is
that's 102nd floor of Tower 1.
The enormity of what's happened in David Vincent's life shows on his face, but does not slow his step.
Please take a picture. Please focus on the picture. To get her face out there so that
Working on 3 hours sleep and a couple of crackers, he protects his fondest hopes, battles his worst fears, and sometimes loses.
I don't have any video of her. To be honest with you, Melissa didn't like to be videoed. She used to holler at me every time I did. I'd give anything to ever holler at me right now.
I'd give anything, he says, to have her holler at me right now. It's a rare lapse. Mostly, there is a desperate monotony to his mission.
I know she made a 911 call at 9:02:07.
It's all that David Vincent knows about what happened to his eldest daughter. It's enough to hang hope on.
When we went back to the cell phone provider, the only thing that we had that they could tell us is that there was a 911 call made from that cell phone at 9:02, which was some 17 minutes after the jet had piled into the thing.
9:02:07. He tells it to everyone he talks to. He clings to it for dear life, because of course it is.
I need to know where she was when she made that call, because that will tell me whether she was downstairs just getting off the path and maybe in a void someplace downstairs, or whether I have to understand that she was upstairs on 102 and have to wonder whether she was able to get out or not able to get out.
By evening, David Vincent has pretty much worn out the corner of 26th and Lexington, and his cell battery is fading, so he moves on. Craig Spitzer is CEO of Alliance. 7 employees, everyone thought to be in the building that morning, are missing. He cannot, will not, bring himself to believe they're gone.
I'm not going to say that to you right now.
You can't?
No, and I won't. And I won't for myself, and I won't for the people in there.
In there is a room full of people who have loved someone too long to give up so soon, and what's left after hope is unthinkable. It is why they agreed to expose this rawest of human times to the glare of the camera lens, because maybe somebody out there has information about Roland, something that will keep his brother moving.
I go to sleep with hope, I wake up with none.
And perhaps somebody saw Eric in a stairwell racing to safety.
We don't know. Maybe he's out there someplace, got hit on the head, and he doesn't know who he is. You know, maybe he's unconscious and he didn't have any identification on him.
And as it turns out, nobody can say for sure that Melissa was in the office for that 8:30 meeting.
I have to tell you, Craig, that's the best news that I could possibly hear, because what you're telling me is you can't confirm Melissa in that office space, and that's what I had to know. Yeah. That's what keeps me going.
So if you know anything about Melissa, call her father. He'd give anything to hear her holler at him again. Candy Crowley, CNN, New York.
Our internet site provides a special service for those seeking information about people missing after the attacks. You can post the person's name and picture on our website. Information on the missing can be sent to us at missing@cnn.com.
CNN has learned that Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon offering to allow a meeting between his foreign minister, Shimon Peres, and Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat, but there's a condition. Mr. Sharon says there must first be what he's calling an absolute calm for 48 hours in the region. The Israeli leader had earlier vetoed the meeting. Arafat is reported as saying he's ready to meet with Peres, in his words, anytime, any place. Let us take a moment now to update you on the latest developments. CNN has learned that Pakistan will demand Afghanistan's Taliban rulers turn over Osama bin Laden. A top Pakistani official travels to Kandahar, Afghanistan tomorrow to deliver the ultimatum with a 3-day deadline. Now, the Afghan Islamic Press news agency says bin Laden has denied any involvement in the U.S. terror attack.
The grim task of clearing debris from the fallen World Trade Center towers goes on in New York City. Mayor Rudy Giuliani says authorities are taking it day by day and deciding when the search changes from a rescue to a recovery operation. On the investigative front, the Justice Department says a second suspect has been arrested by the FBI. He's considered a material witness in the terrorist attacks.
Now, the Bush administration working on its plans for an appropriate U.S. response. Mr. Bush met Saturday with his national security advisors at Camp David. He also called the leaders of Mexico and Spain as part of his effort to build an international coalition against terrorism.
As rubble is cleared away from the crash site at the Pentagon, officials there have announced the first confirmed death. That confirmation puts the revised death of Pentagon-related missing and presumed dead at 187. Also Saturday, the Pentagon gave a name to the U.S. military's mission to secure America's borders and lend support to civil authorities. It is Operation Noble Eagle.
All right, returning now to Pakistan. That's where opponents of President Pervez Musharraf are warning against the country offering too much cooperation to the United States. CNN's Mike Chenoy standing by in Lahore with details of that. Mike?
Jim, 42 political parties and religious organizations have just concluded a meeting here in Lahore agreeing to send a message to President Pervez Musharraf. That message very clear that they do not want his government to allow the United States to use air, sea, or land space of Pakistan to help in any American attack on targets in Afghanistan. The group is actually going up to Islamabad to convey that message in person to the Pakistani leader. It was a virtual who's who of key figures from the Islamic fundamentalist sector of Pakistani society, including some religious organizations with long-standing and very close ties to the Taliban leadership in Afghanistan. In addition, representatives of key political parties that have been sidelined from the political scene here since President Musharraf took power in a coup d'etat were also here. Some of the statement did express some condolence for the deaths in the United States, but some of the religious leaders were very firm in saying that any U.S. attack on Afghanistan would be considered as an attack on Pakistan, and one religious leader saying that the Mujahideen, the holy warriors of his party, would join the fight against the U.S. if military action took place. So that certainly makes General Musharraf's job of making Pakistan a meaningful ally of the United States much harder, and it certainly does raise the specter of some kind of unrest or opposition to such policies once the details of what Pakistan in fact is going to do to help the U.S. become clearer. Jim?
All right, Mike Chenoy reporting there from Lahore. Ralitza?
Jim, amid the many stories of loss and devastation are some incredible stories of survival. Amy Lowe was in the lobby of the Marriott Hotel when the World Trade Center came crashing down on top of it. Maggie Rivera was a security guard there. And now they both join us. Thank you very much for joining us. I'd like to go first to Amy. Tell us what happened as you were standing there in that lobby.
When the first plane has crashed, I didn't even know it was crashed, so I was asked by the security to go downstairs to the basement of the hotel to help out Maggie answering the phone, to call out for the ambulance, the cops, anything you could think of, and receiving calls for help. And secondly, I got a call saying, "Oh, your plane, your building got hit again." And I'm like, oh my God, you know, what else can we do? And I'm like, Maggie, and Maggie's like, why don't you go? I'm like, no, we're gonna stay here together. If I go, you go together with me. Then we went upstairs. This was when both buildings was hit already. And by the time we went upstairs to the lobby, everybody has evacuated the building already. And the only person that's allowed to be on the lobby of the Marriott was the firemen, and also the security, the managers of the building. And
yeah, Amy, I'd like to ask Maggie, what was it like For her, she's a security guard, she has some special training. What was it like for you to go through something like this?
Actually, it was very devastating. I was trying my very best to assist and answer all the questions, to evacuate all my co-workers, the guests that were at the hotel. I assured them that I was going to get them all out, and we did. We evacuated. When the first plane hit, we managed to get everybody out, and we only had management in the lobby with security, myself, and Jade, who stood alone with me by my side at all times.
Was there any panic, confusion, Maggie?
Yes, there was a lot of panic, but I assured my coworkers and the guests that everyone was going to be okay and we were going to get them out safely and as quickly as we possibly could.
Amy, to you, what was it like getting out of there? Could you see where you were going? Did you know exactly where to go, what direction to take?
When the building has, when the first tower collapsed down and the parts of the building collapsed on the Marriott, and the whole Marriott collapsed down too, onto our ceiling, just fell on top of us. At that time, in total darkness, all you can depend on is just, you could just depend on the sound if anybody is next to you walking around, and you hear firemen themselves panicking, saying, don't panic, let's go to the right, let's go to the left, let's go here, no, somebody has fallen down. No, I mean, it's like it's all based on fear. You could hear the voice of panic and fear in the fireman's voice. And of course, myself, I'm like really like nervous already, and I can't see all the stuff is like all over your face, all over your mouth. You know, you're choking, like I'm gagging for oxygen, and all you care about is trying to find an exit to get out of that rumble.
Maggie, what was it like for you to kind of try to lead people and help them out? What instincts started working in you?
Well, I was very calm because we have that training. I've been doing security for 13 years. I was very calm. We were dealing mainly with the fire department because that's all we had in the lobby, because we had no guests and no other employees except, like I said, head of the departments like engineering, my department, housekeeping. So we had only the major management from each department. So we dealt like with a lot of firemen. We must have had close to 80 firemen in the lobby at the time when the building had collapsed. So they were looking for someone who would know how to get out, and I assisted them and telling them, no, let's go this way. But when we couldn't get out through one way, which was the tall ship's bar, we turned around and tried to get out through another exit, which would lead through the elevators. We couldn't get out that way, and the next thing we knew, because we had no light whatsoever except one small flashlight, and there we walked onto this debris and we walked over to the top of it, which it was just building beams and the ceiling, and we climbed up a mountain of debris when we saw the light and the fog, and from there the firemen just helped us out because they had just as much fear in trying to get out as we did, that we were the only ones there with them.
And Maggie, from the pre-interview that I had reading about your experience there, there were, as you mentioned, probably 80 firefighters trying to help out, and
Yes.
only 4 or 5 of them got out alive.
I wouldn't be able to say if it was actually 4 or 5. I know I hanged on to 2 or 3 of them. They were helping me get out, and I'm very appreciative because if it wasn't for them, I really don't know how I would get out, because they pulled me out of the debris. They fell on me from the impact, and as they were getting up, they picked me up with them, and I escorted them as best as I could because I knew the pattern of the lobby on how to get out, but I had not the slightest idea that all this debris was on us, and from there is when we climbed over a mountain of debris to get out.
And also that since there's a bunch of other firemen, they were in the middle of the lobby, and also the chief sent a group of firemen upstairs to the 22nd floor of the Marriott, the highest floor, to clean up and to see if anybody's there. That's when everybody, you know, when the building collapsed. So I definitely know that there's still some people up, you know, down there. So that's why, like, you know, I call here so that people can know that there's still some firemen that's up there in the building that collapsed when everything came down.
Amy, how has this changed your life?
Oh, totally.
Well, yeah.
Oh,
It's like
man.
at nighttime when you sleep, you can't even sleep because in the dark, since you have faced that 1 minute of darkness, of death, it's like everything's going to happen in the dark. And when the time comes, time for you to sleep, you can't sleep. You know, every single minute it hits me, and we'll have a breakdown. I mean, it's just that things of these will stay in our life. The rest of our lives.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Maggie, what about you?
Yes, let me tell you, this is like a second life for me. My parents, I'm telling you, they've been very supportive because I've also was here for the 1993 bombing, and I've overcome that fear, and to think that this has happened again and I had to relive this is very, how would you say, I can't think of it in English. I can only think of it in Spanish.
I don't think that there are words that can describe this.
No, it's worse than the word fear or terrified. It's worse than that. You can't describe it.
Amy, let me ask you this. If you had something to say to the perpetrators of this tragedy, of this terrorist act, again, this just, it's beyond words to describe this act, but what would you tell the perpetrators of this act?
I would say that how can a human being with feelings and emotion can do such a thing, you know, to hurt more people? I just don't understand it. I just don't understand.
Amy Lowe, Maggie Rivera, thank you so much to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jim.
Really, it's amazing accounts, and as these personal accounts, as these words, people struggling even to find words, echo around the world and media coverage. When you see these things like this, you understand why international support for a military response, at the same time as building one of the United States' firmest backers, is Britain. Just a short while ago, Prime Minister Tony Blair told CNN's Christiane Amanpour that the world was at war with terrorism.
I'm very pleased at the way that America and the American administration has gone out of its way to consult its allies, to keep us fully informed so that we are part of the deliberations they're making. But we have to do two things, in my view. First of all, there has to be a response to bring those terrorists who committed this attack to account, and we will play our full part in that. And secondly, there has then to be an agenda that we construct at an international level that involves the whole of the international community in dismantling the machinery of international terrorism, how it's financed, how these people move about the world, the countries that then harbour them and give them help. At every single level, we have to pursue and dismantle this machinery of terror. And that is important, not just for the purpose of bringing those people to account, but also in order to make sure that this does not happen again. Well, we've made it very clear that we stand side by side with the United States. And it's not a question of the United States simply saying, this is what we're going to do now, come and join us. The US is in close consultation with us and with other allies, and I think there will be a very broad support for a response that allows us to pursue and bring to account those responsible for this act, and do it as an act of justice. It's fairly clear where the evidence is tending, but I think it is important that we consider the evidence in a very careful way, that it's factually based, that we are hard-headed about it, but once we have come to a conclusion, then it is important that we hold those people who are responsible for this, as I say, to account. And I think you will find, incidentally, that that is the view right round the world. I've spoken to Arab leaders in the past few days that have expressed their outrage at what has happened, their determination that this should be seen as something that the world of Islam is standing against, not merely countries like America and the United Kingdom. And I think you will find that there is enormous support for the idea that we must put together a broad-based coalition that hound these people down and that bring them to account, and do it, as I say, for reasons of justice. We owe it to those people that lost their lives, to their families who are grieving, and to our own defence of democracy and liberty and freedom.
That was British Prime Minister Tony Blair. In Russia, the memory of terrorist bombings in Moscow and other cities 2 years ago heightens sympathy for the victims of Tuesday's attacks, but Russian officials are saying they've been warning against such attacks for some time now. Jill Doherty has a story.
Russia is telling the West, we tried to tell you. Terror in the United States or terror in Russia. It's all controlled by international terrorist organizations, they say. The #1 criminal suspect in both countries, Osama bin Laden. The FSB, successor to the KGB, tells CNN it knew where bin Laden was hiding before the attacks on the U.S. and informed other special services. He's since changed his location, the FSB says, but is still in Afghanistan. And the agency vows to find out where he is and inform its Western colleagues.
Russia has never tried to kill Osama bin Laden. We usually deal with infiltrating criminals, arresting them, and turning them over to the courts to be punished. That's what I think should be done. However, we have experience where, when a suspect offers armed resistance, in order to avoid casualties, it is possible to kill him.
President Vladimir Putin says he's been warning the West since he took office that there is a worldwide network of fanatical terrorists funded primarily by drug money. They're fighting in Chechnya, he claims, and are responsible for a wave of apartment house bombings that hit Russia 2 years ago. But the West, Moscow says, spent too much time scolding Russia for how it dealt with the threat.
I think now they understand that it is not just our internal issue. It's a problem for the entire international community.
Evil must be punished, says the Russian president.
But we should not become like bandits that act from behind a corner. We should consider our decisions and proceed from true facts.
The attacks in the United States, he says, could be compared in scale and cruelty to what the Nazis were perpetrating. I feel guilty for what has happened, Vladimir Putin says. We spoke so much about this threat, but apparently not enough. Jill Doherty, CNN, Moscow.
People from all over the world are expressing their sympathy and their support. That includes the Middle East. Thousands of Israelis took part in rallies in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. Israeli Foreign Minister Shimon Peres telling the crowd in Tel Aviv the U.S. leads the struggle for freedom, for security, and for humanity. Kuwaitis gathered at blood banks to donate blood for the victims of the attacks. Donors say they want to show their gratitude for U.S. involvement in the Gulf War after Iraq's invasion in 1990. Egyptian Foreign Minister Ahmed Maher signed a book of condolences at the U.S. Embassy in Cairo. After that ceremony, the Egyptian official urged the world community to hold an international conference against terrorism. Meantime, in Britain, soccer players observed a minute of silence and wore black armbands on the field as a sign of mourning.
Iraq's leader Saddam Hussein has issued his first full statement regarding the terror attacks. Rula Amin has more from Baghdad.
Iraq's President Saddam Hussein, in a message to the American people, appealed for serenity.
America needs wisdom, not power. It has used power along with the West to the extreme extent, only to find out later that it doesn't achieve what they wanted. Will the rulers of America try wisdom just for once, so that their people can live in security and stability?
The tone of this letter, read on state television, more muted than his first reaction. The day after Tuesday's attacks, he had said, despite the conflicting human feelings, what happened was a result of America's foreign policy, if the attackers were indeed not Americans, he said. And he pointedly did not condemn the attacks. He's still not condemning them. But this time, he called the attacks evil inflicted on America and called for restraint. He also referred to the harassment of Arab Americans and American Muslims in the United States. He said that despite the pain he says Arabs and Muslims have suffered from the United States, he says they never harassed Westerners who walked in the streets of Baghdad and other Arab capitals. In his 12-page letter, Saddam Hussein questioned the motives of any military attack, and although he acknowledged U.S. might, he questioned the use of it.
We ask again, America aiming the fire of its weapons on a specific target, harming it or destroying it with the support of the West, would it solve the problem?
The official newspapers, which had withheld comments since Tuesday, echoed the same line. As for Iraqis, the government wouldn't allow us to interview them. Iraqis blame the United States for their 10 years of suffering under UN sanctions. They also remember the loss of lives they suffered during the Gulf War.
The people we talked to off camera had conflicting feelings. On one hand, they were satisfied to see the American government under attack. On the other hand, they sympathized with the victims They told us they know very well what's it like to be one.
But mostly, they don't believe Iraq was involved and fear the United States will use the attacks as an excuse to hit Iraq. Many say with the unlimited support the U.S. has now, the United States won't have to show solid proof if it decides that Iraq has either lent a hand to the attackers or supported other terrorists. And that again, the Iraqi people will be under the fire of U.S. might. Rula Amin, CNN, Baghdad.
Well, with the threat of a U.S. retaliatory attack looming large, international humanitarian agencies have evacuated their staff from the Afghan capital, Kabul. Pakistan is bracing for an influx of Afghani refugees across their long shared border. Secretary of State Colin Powell says Pakistan has agreed to a list of requests from Washington that includes closing its border to Afghanistan. But that's a difficult task. Thousands of Afghanis who fled the Taliban rule are already living in squalid refugee camps inside Pakistan.
The heightened tensions place 8 international aid workers on trial in Afghanistan in an even more precarious situation. Sheila Cast reports.
24-year-old Heather Mercer was excited last spring about going to Afghanistan with a Christian aid group.
She was trying to think of ways that she could really blend into the culture, and she just really wanted to immerse herself in another culture.
But within 5 months, Mercer and 7 other Westerners were arrested, charged with trying to convert Muslims to Christianity, a very serious charge in Afghanistan. And then this happened.
To the extent that governments such as the Taliban government in Afghanistan support such things, you need to understand you cannot separate your activities from the activity of these perpetrators.
Afghanistan, where Mercer is on trial, is at the top of the potential target list for U.S. military retaliation because of Afghanistan's support for Osama bin Laden, the top suspect in the terror attacks. So on Thursday, U.S. and German diplomats pulled out of Afghanistan, along with United Nations and some Red Cross workers. There is no one from the U.S. there to continue negotiations about Mercer and the other American, Dana Curry. Even Heather's mother, Deborah Oddie, who had just arrived in Afghanistan on Tuesday, was forced to leave. Her head covered as required, she told reporters it was, quote, devastating to leave after just one visit with her daughter.
It sounds like she's in a dangerous situation as it is, and now with what's happened in the last week, that's heightened.
Everyone's prayer is that just God brings her through this safely. She's expelled from the country. That's our best hope.
To be expelled rather than forgotten as the United States decides the next step in its new war on terrorism. Sheila Cast for CNN, Washington.
Well, finally, as we conclude this hour's coverage, a group of New Yorkers congregated outside the city armory
to pray for those still missing after Tuesday's tragedy.